Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by how plants drink.
Well, you can watch the plants drink in the soil moisture trends. So during the day, they take moisture out of the soil, and at night they rest. And so there's a stair-stepping in the data. But I'll give you a little story about watching plants drink. And a guy in northern Texas who had used a lot of soil moisture monitoring had a day that was just off the charts hot and windy, and 118 degrees, 35 mile an hour wind. He was watching the plants drink all right, but he was also irrigating on a usually about an 8-day loop. So it took 8 days for the pivot to get around, because he was putting on, didn't have a lot of flow rate, and so just nice and slow drinking. But he had some fields that were, or some sensors that had just been watered when so the pivot had just come over, and he's watching the plants sitting there with a full profile, and he can watch it drink, versus other fields that have 6 or 7 days since they were watered. And so they were pretty dry. And what actually happened was the fields that had just been watered still tried to stay lush and green and they used so much water. I mean, it was the biggest stair step I've ever seen in any data. Versus those plants that have been watered 6 or 7 days ago, they rolled up like pineapples. They didn't look very, very good at all.
But they weren't drinking very much.
They weren't drinking very much. And so the lesson that this farmer learned, well, he stopped and thought about it, because he thought, there's something in this. I need to learn what this lesson is. And a very smart farmer. And so what he thought, the analogy I'd like to use is if I set off into the desert, and I know it's going to take me 8 days to walk across, and I take enough water to get me there over that 8-day period, and I have to ration it, but on day 1, I drink half my water, I'm going to have a hard time making it out of the desert. I'm probably going to die out there. Whereas if I've already walked 6 or 7 days and I'm almost out, and I know I don't have much water, so I just sit down and I do nothing. And I just hunker down. And in this case, the corn rolled its leaves and it just didn't drink. And the next day, away it went, leaves unrolled, and it continued to drink. What this guy thought is, I don't want my plants to die in the desert, so he backed his pivots up about a day and a half, 36 hours or something, I'm not exactly sure the amount of time, and he re-watered the area that had just been watered. Some people thought he was crazy, but guess what? His corn survived the whole circle, whereas many, many other circles in the area had a pie wedge out of them that died. And that is worth so much money when you think about all the money you've spent on getting corn to that stage. And it might be 30, 40 acres. You've already spent the money on, and it's zero return. And by being able to watch what's going on, how the plant responds to things, you can actually make changes on the fly that both you're going to learn something about the crop, but you're also going to grow a better crop.
And you wouldn't have been able to determine that with NDVI data or other aerial photography?
It would have looked the reverse. It would have looked beautiful and lush and green with NDVI data for the area that had just been watered, and you'd think the rest of it was in trouble, which is what pretty much the rest of the district thought.
And without soil moisture sensors, would you have been able to determine that problem?
No way.
Okay.
So it's by being in touch with the plants, you really he was able to make a decision that was worth a lot of money to him. And at the end of the day, it's all about turning water into money. That's what this is. Why we're in the game. It's why everyone uses soil moisture sensors, because you want to put the right amount of water on at the right time to turn it into more money.
Terrific. Well, thank you, David. Really appreciate your time today.
No problem, Patrick.